102.9 FM and worldwide at WFPR.FM. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Hello, this is Frank Falvey with Frank's Music, and Jim Derrick, our engineer and co-host. Jim, I'm doing a special series on the woman of the Grand Ole Opry. The Grand Ole Opry is in Nashville.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pat Gallagher. Welcome to the Franklin Conservation Commission meeting for July 7th. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we are continuing to meet both in person and virtually. If you would like to participate in person, you're obviously welcome here at Town Hall. Virtually, you're able to participate via Zoom or over the phone. The phone number is 929-205-6099, and you'll need the Zoom ID, which is 860-251-2898. Before we get started, I think we'll take a roll of the commissioners who are present and with us on Zoom. Jeff?
Jeff Livingston, present.
Mike?
Michael Ryan, present.
William Batchelor, present.
Okay. Pat Gallagher, present.
Jeff Milne, present.
Okay. And Richard?
Richard Johnson's here, finally.
So our first order of business is we have a public hearing on the NOI for 175 East Central Street in Franklin. This is a continuation from the prior hearing. Is a representative or their delegate available?
I sent a follow-up email letting them know of the Zoom link update, but I haven't heard back yet.
Okay. In the meantime, Brika, do you want to give an update on where we are with this?
Sure. I received a response from Lenore from WSI. She agrees with the delineation as it's mapped, so she's okay with approval. Her one comment is bank stabilization for the slope going down towards the wetland. So I would recommend that we condition some sort of wildlife conservation mix or upland mix for bank stabilization.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's something you're comfortable
Yeah.
approving tonight, subject to that condition?
Yes, I have not heard any follow-up, however, from the applicant on if they would like a continuation or approval since the previous hearing.
Mr. Chair, is there a DEP number on that?
I think we do
Yes.
have a DEP number,
We do?
looks like, yes.
I'm comfortable approving it. I haven't heard anything otherwise, and Lenora is comfortable approving it as well.
Okay. Poll the commissioners. Jeff, any questions, comments?
Jeff Milne, no questions, sir.
Great. Jeff Livingston?
No questions.
Okay. Mike?
No questions.
None from me.
Richard, any questions, comments?
None for me.
Okay, great. I have no questions. I'm also comfortable approving this. I think, we were prepared to do so last week. The only reason we didn't is the applicant requested a continuance, which we were fine with that. But I think based on the feedback from WSI and Brika, I think we're good to close this out and vote on this week.
Do you mean the public?
Any public comments on this before we do so?
I got a text, the Zoom link isn't working on the thing, so if you said it to me, I'm sorry, I'm deaf, I didn't hear it.
You need to sign in.
News post with the new code and
It was just
new
new
agenda.
They'll
Just the Zoom link.
refresh the agenda.
Oh.
They'll have to go back in on the website and click the
Just
agenda.
thought you was-
Yep, so the Zoom link has been updated, yes.
Thanks, Karen.
One other comment from WSI, it's not in the purview of Conservation Commission, but that the applicant should review Mass DEP comments as they relate to stormwater. Just adding that at the tail end.
Okay. Can I have a motion to close the hearing, Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a motion to close the hearing on the East Central Street, Franklin Ford, NOI.
Okay, thanks. Can I get a second?
I'll second the motion to approve the NOI for to close the public hearing. Sorry.
Jeff?
Approved.
Mike?
Approved.
Approved.
Pat Gallagher? Approved.
Jeff Milne, approved.
And Richard?
Approved.
Great.
Okay, now
So the public hearing on 175 East Central Street is closed. Can I now have a motion to approve an order of conditions subject to our standard special conditions, and subject to additional conditions that, number one, the applicant shall review Mass DEP's feedback and follow up with the conservation agent to the extent any clarification is required. And number two, that the applicant shall propose bank stabilization as per WSI's comments.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Millen, give you a motion to approve the NOI for 175 East Central Street, Franklin Ford, as stated.
Commissioner Batchelor, I second the motion to approve the NOI for 175 East Central Street as stated.
Great, thanks. So we'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Or vote to approve the motion.
Vote to approve, yeah. Vote to approve.
Approve.
Jeff Millen, approve.
Richard?
Approve.
Okay. Pat Gallagher, I vote to approve as well. So the order of conditions is unanimously issued, subject to conditions as so stated. Next on our agenda is the continuation of the public hearing on an NOI for 585 King Street. Do we have the applicant with us or on Zoom tonight?
We have Lenore. We do not have the applicant yet. Welcome, Lenore.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Lenore. How are you?
Would you,
Had a little trouble signing in there with the change in the meeting number.
Yeah, they did.
Were you expecting the applicant to be on tonight?
yes, I just sent them also the meeting ID number. So if you'd like to give them a few minutes, we can.
Yeah, I think if we can take a 10-minute recess and give them a chance to join, so that we can have a good discussion on this. So we'll do that. Okay. Great, thanks.
I'm just so proud to be here. Well, sir, this is just a real pleasure to be here. You know, I've been scared every time I've ever come up here to Nashville, Tennessee from Grinder's Switch. 22 years ago, I was scared when I come up here. I was scared something would happen to me. Now I'm scared it won't. Most generally, it don't. No, there was a handsome man out there. Now, don't give me that stuff. There was a handsome man out there. Yes, sir, and I walked a little faster, and he walked a little faster, and I walked a little faster, and he walked a little faster. I'd have caught him if a fire truck had gotten away. No, I turned around, I said to him, I said, didn't you kind of give me a funny look? He said, lady, you've got a funny look, but I didn't give it to you. Oh, I can't help the way I look. When they passed around looks, I thought they said books, and I said, give me a funny one. I can stand almost anything, though, except the other night a feller said something to me that was real hard to take. He said I looked like I'd washed my face real good and forgot to iron it. That really hurt. Well, I got all excited one night. A feller told me that I looked like a breath of spring, and you know that always sounds good. Well, he didn't use them words. He said I looked like the end of a hard winter. Well, I'll tell you. There's just one thing I've got to say. I ain't two-faced, or I'd have wore the other one tonight. I don't. But I had everything all straightened out. I was going to bring Uncle Nabob tonight. Bless his old soul. He don't ever get to go nowhere much. Uncle Nabob, he's the finest old fella you ever seen. He don't ever do much. He ain't a failure. He really ain't. He ain't a failure. He just started at the bottom, and he likes it there. You know? Uncle Nabob, he's got a kind of a bad habit of dipping into the corn squeezings, you know. He says he just takes a little nip every once in a while to kind of steady his nerves, you know. He gets pretty steady. Sometimes he don't move at all. The other night, Aunt Ambrose Rosie decided she'd really fix him. And she knowed he's gonna be out late, you know. So she got her one of them false faces like the young'uns wear at Halloween, you know. She didn't really need it, all our family favors. But she got this false face and she put it on and she hid out there by the bushes where she knowed Uncle Nabob was coming by. And sure enough, along about midnight, old Uncle Nabob come a-weaving in there, you know. He wasn't fixing no watches. And he come in there and he come up by that bush and she had a sheet all up over and that false face on and she jumped out at him and she said, "Boo! I'm the devil." Uncle Nabob said, "Well, shake hands with me. I married your sister."
The next member of the Grand Ole Opry is called D. Zucker Sisters. It's D, capital D, small e, capital Z-U-R-I-K, Sisters. They became members in 1944 because of the yodeling. Jim, I can't find anything else for them.
Is that right?
I can't find a recording. I can't find any biography. Jim, this would be a great time for you to tell the folks how they can reach us and send us comments.
Frank's music can be heard at our podcast site, which is at soundcloud.com. And you want to go into the search bar on soundcloud.com, type in Frank's Music. Make sure you use the apostrophe, F-R-A-N-K, apostrophe S, music, and Frank's last name, Falvey, F-A-L-V-E-Y, and that will pull up all of our podcasts, which include now both Frank's Music and Music to Lift the Spirit, and coming up, I think, on 200 shows, Frank, so there's a lot of material there. You can also email me if you'd like to make a comment or you have a request. You can email me at JDERICK, that's JDerrickRadio @gmail.com.
Goldie Hill. She was born in 1933 to 2005. When she was born, her name was Argolda Vonasil Hill.
She was one of the first women in country music and became one of the first women to hit number one in 1953 with "I Let the Stars Get in My Eyes." She married Carl Smith, another country western singer, in 1957. She also did a lot of religious singing. So let's hear "Make Love to Me," which is a song, Jim, that still to today people are singing.
Take me in your arms and never let me go. Whisper to me softly while the moon is low. Hold me close and tell me what I want to know. Say it to me gently, let the sweet talk flow. Come a little closer, make love to me. Kiss me once again before we say goodnight. Take me in your loving arms and squeeze me tight. Put me in a mood so I can dream all night. Everybody's sleeping so it's quite alright. Come a little closer, make love to me. When you're near, so help me dear, chills run up my spine. Don't you know I love you so, I would be happy till you're mine. When I'm in your arms you give my heart a treat. Everything about you is so doggone sweet. Every time we kiss you make my life complete. Baby doll, you know you swept me off my feet. Now's the time to tell you, make love to me.
Play now, boys.
When you're near, so help me dear, chills run up my spine. Don't you know I love you so, I would be happy till you're mine. When I'm in your arms you give my heart a treat. Every Everything about you is so doggone sweet. Every time we kiss, you make my life complete. Baby doll, you know you swept me off my feet. Now's the time to tell you, make love to
One of the things I'd like to point out is we see this huge time period of gap where there's no women in the genre. The blues is entirely different. Early on in the blues, early at the beginning almost of the blues, Bessie Smith, Ida Cox, Sarah Vaughan, many other people that we've covered before are maybe even bigger names, okay, than the men. Country and Western culture and music, it is not even till the 40s that there is some recognition in solo performance. So let's go on to
Ellen Muriel Deason, born in 1919 through 2012. Ellen was known professionally as Kitty Wells.
an American pioneer female country singer. She broke down a female barrier in country music with her 1950 hit, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. Where did this come from? Hank Thompson did a song in which he related woman to Eve. It was the women who seduced the men. Right?
I get it. Yeah.
And Kitty Wells, reluctantly, really, when her career was kind of fading, right, came out with this song and in essence was saying, it wasn't God who made Honky Tonk Angels. It was many a man.
It's 7:17, so we will resume from our recess. Looks like Mark and Josh are on from the Marcus Partners team. Anyone else from your team on?
No, that's it.
Brika, can I start with you just for an update on, I know there was a meeting last week with the applicant, and just so wanted to see if there's an update on where we are and kind of what's currently open from our point of view.
Sure. At the work session last week, we touched on a few issues, or not issues, but action items. One of those being the alternatives analysis with Grove Street, which Marcus Partners did send in supplemental information regarding that. We touched on the wetland replication areas within the easement. We touched on culvert design changes and requirements under Mass DEP or Mass DEP commentary on the NOI. So those comments are being met. And then I believe, am I missing one other thing? I feel as if there was one other, upstream and downstream ponding and flooding, that is a moot point. So that is a non-issue right now.
And I understand we got back comments from Beta just today.
Correct. Yep. We do have Gary on right now.
Okay. Gary, if you're available, do you have any color to add? We haven't had a chance to really review your comments in depth, but anything to add in the meantime?
The only thing I will add is that we have been in contact, Brika Lee has actually been in contact with Mike Maglio relative to the outfalls coming from King Street in an attempt to try and get a little bit of treatment in the stormwater discharge right there. And I did get an email from Bowler indicating that they are going to make some changes to that, and that was one of the comments that we gave them relative to that. Other than that, Brika Lee has pretty hit on all of the issues that we raised during that meeting.
Okay, great. Mark, anything that you want to add based on what Brika and what Gary were saying?
No, I think that was a good summary. We were able to clear a lot of issues off the list to make sure that all the consultants were in agreement that issues had been addressed so far. I think we narrowed it down to the wetland replication area issue, as well as sort of a final bit of detail on the alternatives analysis, which Marcus Partners has submitted this week. So I think tonight, if we can have a conversation about that information that was submitted in the alternatives analysis, that would be great. We intend to submit a final set of plans incorporating the items that Gary referenced, the revised wetland replication area location, and some other minor details ahead of the next hearing, with the hopes that we'll be moving toward closure at that time. So the alternatives analysis, essentially we provided a higher level of detail regarding the constraints on developing that Grove Street property. So I think it's probably most efficient to see if Lenore or Gary have any commentary or further questions about that information.
Okay. Lenore, if you have anything, and just with the caveat that, the commission hasn't really had a chance to review that yet, so we'll be reviewing that between now and the next hearing, but if you have anything in the meantime.
Thank you, Pat. I haven't seen it. I have not seen that revised submittal, and I didn't see Beta's letter, so I'm in the dark as well, as much as the Conservation Commission is.
Mark, do you know when that would have been sent in?
I think Brika forwarded it to Lenore. Let me see. Yesterday, Brika, am I correct about that?
I saw it this afternoon.
Yeah, but that, Lenore, I can always re-forward it to you. That's fine.
I'm.
That's all right.
I don't know how I didn't see it.
We're all
It might
having
have
technical
come out.
difficulties, so that's okay.
Okay.
That's okay, and it's only one day ahead of the hearing, so we realize it's not a lot of time.
Okay, great. And I'd like to see Beta's letter too. If you could, Gary, if you could send a copy of that to me, just so that I'm consistent. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I will forward that to you, Lenore.
Thank you.
Great. So I think, we'll take all of that under advisement. Any questions or comments from the commission at this point? Jeff?
I have had a chance to look at Beta's comments this afternoon. Next week, our next meeting, when Laura's had a chance to look at it, I'd like to have a conversation about the limited project concept. I'm having a hard time justifying this in my mind. I understand the could aspects, but it really is more the should we aspect. So I'd like to have that conversation next meeting after everyone has seen these minutes.
Okay. Just while we're there, Lenore, are you able, just offhand, to summarize the requirements under the regulations for a limited project approval, just so that we have that and we can take a look?
Sure. Essentially, the commission has the discretion to approve limited projects, meaning those projects that don't comply with the performance standards. And for this type of project, this is a roadway project, so it's listed under 1053(3) paragraph E, which talks about how a driveway or a roadway to access uplands that are not otherwise accessible through an upland area. So if the commission finds that there's no other way to, build a driveway into this property, with upland, through upland areas, and then that would certainly be something the commission could consider as a limited project. The fact that we looked at off-site alternatives is really to do with, it's not really about limited projects. It's about finding an alternative that has less environmental impacts. So they're really two different topics, if you will, or two different discussion items. The first being, do they have any other access to the site, at the site? And then the alternatives analysis looks at whether or not there are other properties in town that may be better suited to this type of project. So given that we've looked extensively at the adjacent properties on this site, I know that the applicant, Ranieri Trust, does own several parcels that are adjacent to this parcel, but there's no way to get into it. There's no roadway, there's no frontage. One of them in particular involves much greater area of wetland alteration. So I think if you look at this site and the adjacent properties, you could consider this to be a limited project. But that's really the discretion of the Conservation Commission.
Lenore, what's the risk to the environment if we allow this to go through as a limited project?
Well, I mean, the risk is that they're altering, 12,000 or so square feet of wetland, and hopefully the wetland replication areas are successful. I mean, that is the goal, to make sure you have no net loss of wetlands. And the applicant has proposed a replication area, that is about 2 to 1. So for every foot of wetlands they're filling, they're proposing 2 square feet of wetland replication. So there is a risk because, the wetland replication area has to function at the end of the day. And it will certainly take a few years for that area to, to stabilize and, sort of the flow to establish itself. And we'll be able to assess the condition of those replication areas over a period of 3 years. Now, if it doesn't work, if for some reason there's some failure in some of these replication areas, the commission has the ability to go back and require the applicant to take some remediation measures. So it's something that you could put into an order of conditions, that in the event that the replication areas do not, are not successful, the commission has the authority to go in and ask for other mitigation or, somehow try to make those replication areas work. So there is a risk, but this is what sort of limited projects are all about. The commission having the discretion, and the fact that the commission will likely, ask for a monitoring plan for at least 3 years to make sure that these wetland replication areas ultimately are successful.
Thanks, Lenore.
And I will just say, I feel that throughout, and we've been at this for maybe 4 or 5 hearings at this point, I think the applicant has worked in good faith with the commission, with Lenore, with Brika, to try and address some of these questions around the replication areas and around the alternatives analysis and the other aspects of this application. So, just wanted to recognize, that the applicant has been, I think, a partner of all of us at the table here. Jenner?
Just a couple of quick questions, clarification questions. So if I recall, Lenore, the last time we spoke about, last time this was in front of us, we had talked about the alternatives analysis. And I believe that one of the points you made is that the alternatives analysis should not just be limited to adjacent properties, but under the stipulation should be any other property owned by the applicant. So I realize we haven't gotten this note yet, but I was reading the July 6th note from Marcus Partners that was posted, I guess, 1 day ago. And it was talking about this, and I'm not going to go into this, but it basically was talking about the one property in Grove Street, which they looked at as an alternative. But then my question then is that the only property that the applicant owns in Franklin, or are there others that should be included in this, and I will underscore this, undated letter from Marcus Partners? I don't know if that's the case, but I just wanted to raise that before people looked at this.
I can speak to that if I may.
Please do.
I think the previous letter from Marcus Partners went into greater detail regarding the property owners' other properties owned in town. And it narrowed down those properties to very few that were suitable for a development like this, which is really the intent of the analysis. And that's how we arrived at this Grove Street parcel as essentially being the only other parcel owned by this this entity that's suitable and sort of comparable for development of this type. Okay. So I think that was one of the things we talked about at this meeting last week. Is I wanted to be sure that we were all on the same page, that we've sort of addressed all the other alternatives, and we were down to this Grove Street parcel as sort of the last alternative that Lenore and Gary were looking for some additional information on. Okay. So I think we've thoroughly evaluated we've evaluated options for accessing the property, alternative options for accessing the site. We've looked into other properties, generally for sale in the town, and we've looked at all other properties owned by the property owner. And we're now down to this Grove Street property as sort of the final piece that they were looking for a little bit more detail on before we eliminate that as a potential alternative.
And just one other comment. This is a general comment, not about the specific project, but in the past, over the past multiple years, I just wanted to point out that through various incarnations of this commission, we have found it extremely difficult to go back and ask for remediation after the fact. Once it's done, it's done.
It's done.
And if the plantings don't take, et cetera, especially even after 2 or 3 years, we have found it almost impossible to make substantial remediation to address the like for like in a way. I'm just saying that. So I would not be flippant about just we'll just address that in 3 years. I'm just saying. So because it's come back to burn us in the past.
Right. No, I hear you there, and I think, and Brika and Lenore, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think one consideration here is just looking at this particular wetland system, and it has 495 on one side, and my understanding is that it's not necessarily part of a much larger system. So I think that's something that I would take into consideration in the context of the replication analysis.
That's fair. Okay.
As an unbiased comment, it is a requirement of their COC.
Michael, or Jeff, any further? No. Great. Mike?
No questions or comments, thanks.
Bill?
I reserve comment until we have all the information.
Richard, any questions or comments for now?
No, I'm good.
Sorry, one other thing. I can bring out that document and include it in your packets for next hearing, so you can revisit all those other properties as well.
That would be great. Yep. This is a public hearing. Any questions or comments that the public would like to make at this point? If you could sign in, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for all the time and effort that's gone into this from both sides. And as we know, I'm here with y'all. I'm like an honorary member at this point.
And can you just say your name and address for the record?
Sorry, Karen Miller.
Thanks, Karen.
And so thank you guys for all this. And like I said before, it's been like a super good learning lesson. And you know, you do feel that you guys are watching over for the best of the town, the surrounding areas, things like that. And I just want to remind you that this isn't the first time a project like this has come to this same parcel of land and been in front of the Conservation Committee over the years, and the Conservation Committee has said no, just because of the reasons you're all saying, right? Because of the ecosystem that's there and such, and you know, there's moving water down beside 495, the culvert there, and you know, moving things around, and even in the middle of the drought, the water's still moving down that culvert, going down to the lower project, down the hill, have you from it, and it just, there's a lot of disruption in that area, right? With the traffic, things like that, you know, just keeping in mind the potential damage to that wetlands and can it ever be recovered, and that's kind of like the whole goal, right? So I just want to make sure, first and foremost, the goal is remembered, not, you know, not the warehouse, not that, the goal of keeping the wetlands and all the acts. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Sure. This water has come before the committee in past years for other projects. Any way that we can see the historical minutes for those meetings, or to hear what those commissioners had in mind when those projects came before them?
And we can take a look, although I would just say, I think, and I appreciate your comment, Karen, but I think every project is different, right? I think every project is evaluated and on its own 2 feet, and you know, there are differences. I will say, I think for this particular project, it has been very, very thoroughly reviewed by the town, by Beta, by WSI. and by the commission, and also by other entities as well. So I think this has been very thoroughly reviewed and looked at, and I think the applicant has made a number of changes that try to get to some of those concerns that we have.
Yeah. To Jeff's question, we also run into this exact same thing in the past. And what we've found is that typically, again, if it's several years between proposed projects, again, it's not like a building, it's not a street, right? It's an ecosystem. It changes over time. So what we find is that the changes are pretty substantial, typically, and it's really unfair, especially to the applicant, to try to go back, say, 5, 10 years, past history, and look at what were the proposed conditions at that time versus the proposed conditions here. So what our typical, again, groups in the past have said, well, we'll pretty much look at the data as it is today, and we'll base our conclusions on the evidence as it stands today. Because again, it's a living system, right? It changes over time.
I agree.
Can I have a motion to continue the hearing to July 21st? What time are we looking at?
7:01. 7:01.
I think it'd be 7.
1 second. Jeff has my agenda. You have
7:04.
my agenda, Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. 7:04. Yeah, 7:04.
Okay, July 21st at 7:04.
Mr. Chairman, can I give you a motion to continue the NOI for 585 King Street to 7/21, 7:01?
Second.
Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Jeff Millen, yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And Pat Gallagher, I also vote to continue. So the hearing for 585 King Street has been continued to July 21st at 7:04 p.m.
Okay.
That concludes the public hearings for tonight. In the general business agenda, the first item is an MBZA for 84th South Street. Brika, what are we?
We actually have a homeowner here.
Oh, okay. Would you like to step up and sign in, if you may? Thanks.
Hi, Brad McPherson, 84 South Street.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
Good.
So what is it that you're here to request tonight?
We're looking to install an above-ground pool.
Okay.
It's in a backyard area. It's within the 50 and 100-foot buffer zone, and that's pretty much what's on the table for tonight.
Brika, any concerns, questions?
No, I went out to the site. He is right that the pool is within the 50 to 100 foot, albeit not wholly. It's only partially within the buffer zone, so that's to your benefit. And it is existing lawn. The wetland is, I think it goes without saying, down gradient, but is segmented off by a rock embankment. And it's very well into a wooded area. It's a forested wetland. So I recommend approving the BZA.
Okay. Jeff, any questions?
Yeah, because is the land pre-disturbed? Is there a lawn currently?
It's existing lawn, yes, and it's between a house and a shed.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Just one point. So again, we've kind of gotten away from this, but I'm just, I'm old and been around. So just one of the things I just wanted to talk to, just address the applicant. So classically, and this is going back several years ago, we would ask anyone who was installing a above-ground pool particularly, but also general pools, that if indeed there was going to be any water discharged from the pool, into property, right? Because obviously some people try to drain their pools, they basically backwash the filter, that kind of stuff, that they do not have chlorinated water coming out of the pool into the wetlands.
Yep.
So that is something that would be very toxic, and we ask simply that whatever system that they have or they choose to put in you know, that they consider that when they're coming up with a maintenance plan for that pool, that's all.
Yep. It's salt water, is what we use.
Fine.
Oh,
Very good.
fun.
Great.
Thanks.
Michael, any questions, concerns?
No questions or concerns, thank you.
Bill?
No.
Great. Richard, any questions?
Nope.
And I have no questions, and am comfortable with the application as well. So can we have a motion to approve the MBZA?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Nolan, I'll give you a motion to approve the MBZA for 84 South Street.
I second the motion.
Great. Vote on the motion, Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Vote to approve.
Okay. Bill?
Approve.
Jeff?
Approve.
Richard?
Approve.
And Pat Gallagher, I approve as well. So the MBZA has been unanimously granted. Thanks very
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Good job.
I will sign off on that tomorrow.
Next up, we have an MBZA for Villages at Oak Hill. Looks like it's for the removal of trees. Is the applicant here? Okay.
Joanne Solomon. I am on the Board of Trustees for our condo association. And the address is 21 Vale, but it's right off of Washington Street. It's the old Klein Innsbruck ski area where the development is. And when they developed this area, some of the buildings are rather close to the wetland area because the way they designed it was to be contoured to the land. There are in particular, 5 trees that are very hazardous to buildings and consequently to the residents inside. So what we're asking for is permission just to cut them. So that we can, and actually, I believe 4 of them are dead. Or 3 are completely dead and 1 is half dead. And there's 1 that's alive. So they're really, it's dangerous. But we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by asking permission to cut them.
Thank you for coming before us. And it sounds like you did get an arborist to take a look and confirm.
Yes, we do. We have a good tree service. They went around and they indicated trees that had actually separated. Some of them had separated so that they advised us to remove them even though they were not in a conservation area. But they were looking for the safety of the buildings and for the people, and apparently once the trees start to split, they are much more prone to bursts of air or something that we're getting now in our systems, and they recommended that we remove some of those, but we also want to address the ones that the couple that are in the conservation.
Question.
Just may point out, so I'm looking at the pictures that were submitted of some of the trees. I just want to point out that some of these trees are about twice as tall as the buildings there next to. So if indeed you had any kind of rot in any of these trees, this specific tree, the trees are actually rotted, you could definitely see them coming not just down on, but through one of the structures, okay?
Yes.
I mean, it's like, it's not like minor, okay? I'm just saying.
No,
So
we want to avoid that.
Yeah. But I know Breaker brought up the point in her but whether or not, it could be topped or removed. And I really do think that's an arborist question, right? I mean, does that even make any sense, right? I mean, in other words, if it's going to be dead in a year, right, why would you top it just to, have to come out and then remove the rest of it once it's dead? It's kind of dumb. So, I mean, I understand that too. I'm just saying.
Question. Are the trees in a resource area?
They're within the 0 to 25 no touch.
They're in the 25 no touch?
Yes.
Then I would strongly recommend not stumping.
So that was my suggestion, and we talked about that. Yep, we talked about that. Go ahead.
That way
You don't want us to stump them?
Nope. cut down to the stump, don't remove the stump. So-
Leave the stump.
Okay, that's what
Yeah,
you're.
she's
Okay,
on
so
board with that.
we weren't even,
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking stump to the ground.
6 to 8 feet.
We were talking 6 feet.
Yeah, you just want to make.
You
it
can
safe.
bring them down
Yep.
as long as you don't
Grind the stumps down.
degrade
Oh, no. Well, it's
degrade
all the land
the
that
root
nobody goes in
system.
anyway.
Yeah, they
No,
wouldn't want
this
to do that
land
anyway.
does
You
not-
don't want to destabilize any of that.
Yeah.
Okay,
It wouldn't be touched.
That's
because
fine.
Nobody goes in that land.
Yep.
okay.
Great.
I'm good.
Can I have a motion to approve the MBCA subject to a condition that the stumps remain?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Miller, I'll give you a motion to approve the MBZA for Villages Oak Hill as stated.
Bachelor, second.
Vote on the motion.
Just one comment, no,
Sure.
I do want to, I was here for the design. It was
Yes.
for a long time. And I remember fighting about where that line was gonna be, how close to it. I remember all those meetings, oh, yes. So I just want to say your point about them being very close to.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I remember that vividly. But yes, so I'm in agreement.
Thank you.
Vote to approve with the conditions as stated.
Bill?
Approved.
Jeff Miller approves.
Richard?
Approve.
Right, and Pat Gallagher, I approve as well. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's much
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the
appreciated.
explanation.
Good job.
Thank you. Have a good
Tom.
night.
Yeah. You'll want to let me know when they're coming down, okay?
Oh,
So
yes.
just send me an email.
I will, yes, we have to schedule it. It's not going to be immediate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda is a permit modification for the Pleasant Street and Delcart invasive treatment extension.
It's from me. The NOI is expiring in July, so I am asking for an extension so we can continue treating.
I think that would be good.
All right?
Yes, please.
Would we extend for?
It's a 1-year extension.
1 year extension.
Yes.
That's it?
Okay.
Yes, right now.
You can go longer than a year, you know.
I could go up to 3. Would you like me to go up to 3? We only have
I would prefer more than
1
one.
year on it. All
I
right.
would go through, my personal opinion, we're gonna wanna do this every year. I mean, we're going
Okay.
to. I mean, at least we're gonna have the option of whether it's needed or not.
They're not gonna come in unless we pay them
Of
to come in,
course,
so
of
I
course. So
I
what's
think
the-
we're
Yeah,
safe.
right.
That's why I put it for a
Yeah.
year.
So I'm just saying, yeah, could we just give them for 3 years and just?
Let's just go through.
I agree with that. I think 3 years is appropriate. I get a motion to approve the NOI, or COC, or rather, order of conditions, excuse me, for 3 years.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Miller, I'll give you a motion to approve the permit modification extensions for Dolcar invasive treatment extension as stated.
Bachelor, second the motion.
Thanks. Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Approved.
Bill?
Approved.
Jeff?
Yes, approve.
Richard?
Approve.
Pat Gallagher, I vote to approve as well. It's extended for 3 years.
Good.
Next up, we have a COC for 850 Summer Street. Brika, any comments, feedback?
I went and conducted a site visit. Everything was executed according to plan. I did notice that the wattles were not biodegradable. This was before my time. I reached out to the applicant and I reiterated that it's imperative that is removed. But I told her she could not remove them until her COC was granted. So we have been in contact with that. And
Okay. So you'd recommend granting this?
Yep.
Great. Any questions? Can I get a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Miller, I'll give you a motion to approve the COC for 850 Summer Street.
Second.
Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes,
Bill?
approved.
Approved.
Jeff?
Approved.
And Richard?
Approve.
Pat Gallagher, I approve as well. The COC is granted for 850 Summer Street. Next up on the agenda, we have the violation for 305 Union Street. The applicant or property owner here.
Right here.
Okay. Could you please sign in and introduce yourself?
We've all signed in.
Right.
My name is Attorney Conrad Blutzer Jr. I represent the property owner who's here with me, Margaret Murray. And also with me is Bruce Hoskins, who is a scientist from FSL Associates.
Great. Brika, would you like to start on this, or?
Sure. So we all are in receipt of your letter, and at the recommendation of our town attorney, we are not closing out the enforcement order. We will extend it so you can be compliant with Mass DEP reporting processes as it is written in the enforcement order. I would like to give you the courtesy to tell me when that timeline is, so I can extend the enforcement order to that time. It has been extended 3 times already. So, you or yourself, when will that NTWP be submitted to Mass DEP so we can close out this enforcement order?
We are in the process of putting together an abatement plan now to deal with the asbestos-related materials that are contained in the cistern.
Sure.
The cistern is a closed system. There is no evidence that there's any damage to any wetlands here. We've had 3 different individuals, including a professional wetland scientist, who has gone through the area and found no damage to the ecology, no damage to the wetlands whatsoever, no evidence of any stress to the wetlands that's occurred. And also, we have to remember that we're talking about asbestos here. There are no regulations on asbestos in wetlands.
So we get back to my original question, though.
I'm trying to answer your question, if you don't mind. We are in the process of putting together a plan, and part of doing that is that we had the water in the cistern tested. We're waiting for the results of the test in the cistern. As you probably know, even drinking water containing 7 million parts per liter is safe with asbestos. So what we're trying to do is determine how much asbestos is in the water in the cistern. Asbestos obviously is found, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So the first thing we're doing is getting back the results of the water test. Once we have the water test back, which I'm hoping will be next week. I'm told with the holiday it's taken more time than we expected. At that point in time, we can finalize a plan to go to DEP. We've already talked to Krista several times at DEP. We're putting together a plan for the remediation of the asbestos-containing materials that are in the cistern. We're also putting together a plan for the asbestos that is contained in a pipe that is on the property as well. We will put those plans together, submit them to DEP. Once DEP has them, we're looking for their approval. We'll work with them and we will do whatever they require. Once those plans are approved, we will submit them to the Conservation Commission as part of the 10-day notice. We are hopeful that we will be able to do that over the next several weeks. The first step is to get back the results of the water test. Once we have them, we can then finalize the plan, get it to DEP. Once we have approval from DEP of the plan, then we could submit it to the Franklin Conservation Commission.
Sure. I think you're crossing hairs a little bit with departments. So the 10-day notice is not to me, that is to Board of Health.
Understood.
So that's right. Asbestos is not, especially this pipe outside, is not under the purview of the Conservation Commission.
Right.
It is within the buffer zone, so any work to remove that will need to come through us and be permitted.
Correct.
So just to clarify for your knowledge.
No, I did know that, yes.
So, can you project when this NTWP by a licensed asbestos abater will be delivered to Mass DEP so we can extend the enforcement order for Margaret to keep her compliant? I want to note to the commission that DPW assumes that this cistern is an open system, and per Mass DEP, it cannot be definitively proven until the water and the asbestos materials are removed. Since that hasn't happened yet, it's anybody's best guess at this point.
My understanding, based on the historical records, is that it is a closed system. You're making an assumption that it's not, but it's my understanding.
Council, if I may, we're making an assumption based on the best information we have. The Town Department of Public Works has offered to go in and assess whether or not the system is open or closed. Those efforts have been declined by your client.
Correct.
However, without any information to the contrary, it is the assessment of DPW that it is an open system. And therefore, we're proceeding on the basis that anything that is in the cistern has the potential to spread to the wetland resource areas that are located beyond that system. Now, we would again reiterate that DPW is willing to come in and to assess whether or not it is in actuality an open or a closed system, not based on historical records, but based on the facts on the ground.
DPW, what you're telling me is they have no idea, so they're guessing that it is an open system.
No,
Might
that is not what I'm telling you. I am telling you that based on their knowledge of the wetland systems of the town of Franklin, that they have made a determination in their professional judgment, based on the facts that they have, that it is an open system. But they are also open to considering evidence to the contrary, which we have requested on numerous occasions and have not received.
There's no evidence that I'm aware of that that is an open system. It is in fact a closed system.
Can I add one comment? I'm sorry. FSL Associates, the restoration plan or the non-traditional work plan that they submitted, which is deficient because they're unlicensed, states it's an open system. So that's also where I'm getting it from.
I'd like to say a few things, and then I'm going to defer to the other commissioners and Brika if you have any follow-up as well, and then we'll give you an opportunity to respond. But I think we are working with half a hand of cards right now, and there's information that we've requested, and this enforcement order dates back to May. You know, we are now 2 months removed from the initial enforcement order. It does not take 2 months to prepare a restoration plan. It does not take 2 months to test the water. These are things that we've looked to work with your client and to address these concerns. And what your client is contending may well be true. We just don't know, and we haven't been given the opportunity to confirm that. And we feel as a commission that your client has not been cooperating with our requests that we think are reasonable and within our jurisdiction. We may not have jurisdiction over asbestos, but we do have jurisdiction both under the Wetland Protection Act regulations and under the town's wetland protection bylaw over the 100-foot buffer zone. And it is on that basis that we're exercising our jurisdiction to try and assess whether there is any risk to the wetland resource areas beyond the system. So that is where we're coming from. And we feel that there has been a lack of cooperation, and that's why we're here today at this point. So we are looking for a firm timeline of when your client can provide this information, not only to Mass DEP, but also the information that we've requested under our jurisdiction as a conservation commission. So we'd like to have that timeline, and that's my expectation, that we walk away from tonight with a firm timeline so that we know when we can expect that information, and that your client is going to work with us going forward to try and determine whether there are any impacts of what is in that cistern on the systems beyond it. So at this point, I'll defer to the other commissioners. Jeff, do you have any questions, comments?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't.
Okay.
Commissioner Batchelor, my frustration comes that originally when this was brought to our commission, we had this dialogue, and it was quite clear on our part what we were looking for so that we could execute the violation within its proper timing. And all we've gotten is pushback and denial. We have been very patient in not enforcing the order. And in fact, town council has suggested we keep it open, but at some point, this will close, and if we have to, we'll defer to the state. And then we can get into what the state charges for what we asked for months ago.
Jeff, any questions or comments at this point?
Honestly, I think Pat said it extremely eloquently, and I'm completely in support of his opinion, comments. I don't like to see a contest of wills in Franklin. It doesn't happen very often, but I do think that we are in that kind of situation, frankly. It usually does not work out well for the applicant, I will say, historically. And I'll leave it at that.
Michael, any questions or comments at this point?
No questions or comments, thanks.
Richard, any questions or comments at this point?
No questions at this time.
Brika, anything that you'd like to add?
Oh, thank you, Patrick.
Council, would you like to respond to anything that was said or add anything?
I'd just like to say that I don't think that the applicant is trying to do anything surreptitious here. I think the applicant, she's been sick over this whole thing. She's trying to do everything she can to resolve the situation that exists here and do it in a way that everybody's happy with. She's hired 3 different consultants, FSL Associates. She's hired Paul McManus from Ecotech, who is a professional wetland scientist. She's hired Glenn Nelson, who I think, Ricky, you've dealt with, who is a licensed abatement designer, asbestos designer. She's trying to do the right thing here. That's what she's trying to do. And unfortunately, it's taken some time. I just got involved in this the other day, so I have not had time to deal with this either. What we're doing is we're getting the water tested to find out what kind of levels asbestos is in it. As you know, the roof of the cistern collapsed into the cistern. It's an unfortunate situation. There's difficulty getting to the site, which has caused some of the delay, and there's difficulty with holidays and everything else, just trying to get everything done. We will move things along as quickly as we possibly can, and we will do what DEP tells us to do in terms of remediating this situation. As you know, there are no wetlands regulations with regard to asbestos. It's not a stressor to the ecology, it's not a stressor to the wetlands. But we're still trying to get the water evaluated and put the best plan together to remediate this situation so that it works for everybody. We will not delay it. We will get this done as quickly as we can, and we will try to get the remediation plan so that DEP is happy with it, and we can get it all resolved to the satisfaction of everyone.
And has the water testing taken place? Is it just being processed by the lab?
No, it's taken. We took place. Was it last week or the week before?
It was last Friday.
Last Friday, and we were expecting to have the results, which we thought would be next week, but it looks like it will be next week.
And would you be in agreement to share the results of the testing along with the draft remediation plan with the conservation agent at the same time that you share those with Mass DEP?
I will discuss that with my client. What I need to do right now is to get those results, put together the plan, and evaluate it, and we'll make decisions at that time.
Okay. And from my standpoint, until those things are done, I still consider your client to be in violation of our enforcement order. So I would expect that those materials are shared with the conservation agent at the same time that they're shared with Mass DEP. I agree with Town Council that Mass DEP is the lead agency involved here. The Conservation Commission does not regulate asbestos. However, we regulate what happens in the buffer zones, both under the Wetland Protection Act and under the town bylaw. And so that is the basis that we're exercising our jurisdiction on. What timeline are you looking at for the restoration plan? Is it, can we expect that within a week, 10 days, 2 weeks?
Yes, this is Margaret. Again, I don't want this to be contentious in any way, shape, or form. But you did meet the fellow last week, Glenn Nelson from Smith and Wesson.
Excuse me, can you step to the microphone, please? Thank you. And you identify yourself because...
Margaret Murray, and I am signed in, 305 Union Street. So last week, we all met with the asbestos licensed planner, correct? And he is creating a plan. He said typically, and again, I've never experienced this before, but it's what they do all the time. He said typically it's submitted to DEP. They do mash it back and forth a little bit with,
We just
they
want a
might enhance
timeline.
it or not enhance it or whatever. So then it comes back, it gets finalized, and typically the finalized version is then submitted to the town.
Well, I just want to reiterate, it would be my request, and, this is me acting as chair here, that it would be my request that you would consent to providing that information to the commission at the same time that you provide it to DEP. I think we have similar interests to DEP. we would appreciate having an opportunity to review the restoration plan and to provide any comments. And I think that would make for a better end product. And in the spirit of cooperation, I don't think that's an unreasonable request. Regan?
I want to make note that what the commission is requiring is a restoration plan for wetland resources, not just wetlands, wetland resources, as they're listed out in our bylaw, right? That includes the 100-foot buffer zone. The non-traditional work plan is the scope of work for a licensed asbestos designer for that proposed work, the scope of work, to remove that, right? So I've been speaking to Krista, and we are both in agreement that it is beneficial to your pocketbook and time to include a wetland component to that non-traditional work plan. That way you are not doubling your work writing out scope of work. Does that make sense? So you can submit something else. You could submit 2 separate documents and satisfy the requirement of Mass DEP and satisfy the requirements of the Conservation Commission, provided that the scope of work is following the legal requirements that Mass DEP requires for asbestos abatement. Does that make sense?
We will follow the Mass DEP requirements.
Okay. So, go ahead, Patrick.
No,
Well,
so
I would keep going down it.
So what I'm hearing is that you can anticipate in the next 2 to 3 weeks having a restoration plan to be submitted to DEP. You know, again, I would just reiterate, we would like to see a draft of that, but I understand you can discuss that and you can provide your response. But I just want to be clear that I think until that condition is met, there is still the issue of the enforcement order not being complied with. So we want to work with you. I think it's a reasonable request. I also want to say that I think things have been said, inferred, that are unfortunate. Council, I did not appreciate the tone of your letter, to be frank. I thought that it just was not appropriate, particular passages from your letter. But I think in the best interests of your client, the town, I think we want to set that aside and move forward.
My client is here to work together with this Franklin Conservation Commission and with DEP to resolve the situation. That's what we're here for.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
I've said my piece.
Okay.
Jeff, no comments.
Right. So I think, I don't know if we want to have a motion to extend the enforcement order to our next hearing, and we can pick up the discussion at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or do we want to go 2 meetings out?
I think let's extend to the next meeting, and then we can discuss a further extension at
That's
that
the
point.
21st, Jeff.
So can I have a motion for that, please, Jeff?
7/21, okay. We don't need time on that, do we?
Nope.
Okay.
No time, because it's a...
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a motion to extend the violation enforcement on 305 Union Street to the next meeting, July 21st.
Right, thanks.
I'll second the motion.
Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Approved, continue.
Bill?
Approved.
Jeff Millen approved.
Richard?
Approved.
And Pat Gallagher, I approve as well.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Next up, we have
Minutes.
minutes. First for June 9th. Any questions, comments? Richard, any questions on the minutes for June 9th?
Vote.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, a motion to approve the minutes for June 9th.
Second the motion on 9th.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Approved.
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 Richard?
Approve.
Okay, and I approve as well. Now we have the minutes for June 23rd. Any questions or comments on this? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Millen, give you a motion to approve the minutes for June 23.
Second motion on the 23rd.
Thanks. Jeff?
Yes.
Michael?
Approved.
Bill?
Approved.
Approved.
Richard?
Approve.
That's
Great.
good.
The minutes are approved. Any further discussion?
Rika
items?
has something, I believe.
The 40B.
40B.
Got it.
Would you like to lead that, Pat, since you are more familiar with that process? Internally, the town has been developing a sort of checklist for friendly 40B projects that come in. I'm relatively new to 40B projects. I know wetlands, not other things like that. But the 40B project is affordable housing. So to help make, not recommendations to ZBA, but to give ZBA the benefit of having all information available, town staff has developed this checklist, which you all have, that each department will go through and note things within their jurisdiction. So for us, it would be wetland resources. I want to note that for friendly 40B projects, the applicant is more or less exempt from local bylaws. They have to file a waiver, but the state takes precedent. State wetland resources take precedent.
And the background here, so under 40B, and this is just super high level, under 40B, if the percentage of affordable housing units in a particular town are below a certain threshold, and there are a few different types. One of them is if 10% or less of the housing stock is affordable as designated by the Department of Housing and Community Development, a developer has the opportunity to propose a quote-unquote 40B project, a low-income housing project, where the ZBA stands in the shoes of all of the other local agencies and can grant waivers from other local bylaws and ordinances as part of the approvals process. The idea is, rather than having an applicant go before each of the individual boards, there's a streamlined permitting process where it is quicker to go through. There is one agency, the ZBA, that oversees that, and the ZBA cannot deny a waiver request if it would make the project uneconomical. So that's where there's less than 10% affordable housing in a particular town. In Franklin, the threshold is above 10%. So Franklin is not subject to that requirement. A developer can still bring a 40B application, and the mechanism is the same. It's still a single permit application where the ZBA would be the responsible agency for all of the local approvals. The only difference between this type of 40B, called a friendly 40B, and one where the threshold is below 10%, is the ZBA is not subject to the requirement to grant a waiver unless it would render the project, or that it can't withhold a waiver if it would render the project uneconomic. So in essence, there is still the same level of discretion as any typical housing application, but it's all done under the roof of the ZBA as opposed to going through each agency. For our purposes, a friendly 40B applicant would go essentially before the ZBA to get relief from our wetland protection bylaw.
Right.
So the question and what the checklist is trying to set up is, here are the town departments and boards and commissions that would be weighing in and providing informal feedback on those applications. We would still be hearing applications in our authority as the kind of state delegated agency under the Wetland Protection Act.
So a couple of years ago, this commission saw a proposal for a affordable housing project. They wanted to reroute a stream on that property, which we objected to strenuously. And if I recall, it ended up not happening. We would not have that ability to fight back in a case.
So that, because that was under the state regulations, they would still need to apply, submit a notice of intent. They would need an order of conditions to do any work that fell under the umbrella of the state regulations. It's only where our bylaw goes further than the state regs.
Right.
That element of the application, instead of being reviewed by the Concom, would be reviewed by the ZBA. But we would provide feedback.
So,
Jeff?
Okay. So I'm going to try to curb my tongue because I have some extremely strong opinions in this area. So if you recall, the very, very large 40B project that is off of Main Street across from the Stop and Shop Plaza, it's behind the road that leads to the Tri-County, the school, right, okay?
Home Street.
Yeah, okay. So let's just review a little history here. So this town was absolutely lied to, and I want to underscore that twice, lied to about the level of unaffordable housing in this town in order to push that project through, okay? It was a huge push by the land developing, basically populated boards in this town, inclusive of ZBA, okay? And it was a huge, I mean, it was bad. I have not forgotten this. So when I see euphemistic language like friendly 40B,
Yes.
I become very jaundiced, and knowing the history of this town, which has been ruled by land developers for so freaking long until we
Correct.
finally threw the bastards out last election, okay, right? And that was part of that entire 40B unnecessarily created, okay, which was built right on top of conservation land, right on top of the brook, okay? I mean, it was ridiculous, but it was pushed through because of the lies that we were told by this land to get beyond the bylaws. So I am not going to be very in support of anything that comes through us in which our bylaws, essentially, regardless of what it is, because of the history of this town and the way this town has dealt with 40B projects, all right? I'm just saying, you know, heads up, I'm not going to be a proponent.
Well, I mean, to Jeff's point, though, there was a recent application, and that was a 40B, and I think we reviewed that pretty thoroughly. And
True.
So
I live in a condo complex that comes under the 40B schedule. The developer got incentives, breaks from the state and the town to build it. And what the developer did is politely forget the specific number of units that were to be a part of this development. In other words, presuppose you have 100 condo units. Of that 100, 25 or 20, disregard.
25%.
25%.
Yep.
Well, guess what happened? There wasn't 25% at the end of the development, and the developer politely bankrupted himself
Or as they always do.
and left.
As
Well,
always do.
those restrictions run with the land. They're enforceable. They
What
run in
what do you
per-
do, what do you do now? It's
Well,
built.
It's a restrictive covenant that can be enforced against whoever owns the property. No, in my.
The issue, who owns it once the developer leaves?
Well, someone owns
The
it.
HOA.
Is it a condominium?
Yeah,
So, there's your answer, the condo.
association.
Yeah.
And you think the HOA has got the money?
I do 40B developments as part of my professional
Right.
world. And I think on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of towns that very deliberately put up every barrier they can to affordable housing where it's very sorely needed.
Correct.
And so I think it has served a critical purpose and doesn't go far enough, in my opinion, with respect to a lot of towns. And I think we're in a massive housing shortage right now. So I understand your point that it's easy, depending on, who's looking at these projects, sure. But I think too that it serves such an important purpose. And with a friendly 40B, the town can say no. They have almost absolute discretion to say no. I think the friendly 40B device is actually a much better device than even a standard 40B because it forces cooperation between the town and the developer. With a regular 40B, it's,
Well, again, Again, you're talking about a town that has been ruled by developers.
Sure.
On real estate variance for the longest time.
Sure.
Including the planning board, the ZBA, you name it, okay?
But we still need more housing in front.
Yeah, well, that may be, but the way it's been done has been very, okay, non-copacetic.
So anyway, so if you have any comments,
Yeah, I
you know,
just,
if you guys have a
kind
chance
of
to
sit
review.
with Jeff on that.
I have one suggestion.
Yeah.
Should they add a section in this checklist that talks about wetlands?
Yep, it's on page 4. So there's, it's on E, section E is Conservation Commission.
Well, I meant the part that they fill out, like, should it say, this is within 100-foot zone?
So as part of their application, if someone is submitting a friendly 40B application, they would need to have all of the
Yes.
same information that they submit to us. It would just go to the ZBA, and then the ZBA would refer it to us and to all the other boards. We provide comments to the ZBA, and then the ZBA
Correct.
takes all of those.
But however, we would not need to approve.
Under our bylaws, but we would still need to, so in practice, a lot of applicants would still come to us for everything they need, separate from whatever.
Okay.
This is just giving them the option of coming to us under the act and the ZBA under the bylaw.
I'm sorry, I cut you off quickly. You were saying that, so they would provide paperwork.
Correct. And my understanding of this process is I would provide a desktop review as well for the ZBA as town staff, identifying all of the resources on site.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So anything further?
Adjourn.
Okay. Vote to close?
Motion to.
Second,
Yes. Close.
we're done.
Jeff? Richard?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're close.
Do we need, Tyler, we need to sign stuff?
Yes.
Okay.